I enjoy coming here tonight. It's my bijlekker. And it's a special time for me. So thank you. Thank you for your preparation, and thanks for being here on a long weekend. Actually, I didn't know it was a long weekend. My schedule is Jan just helped me to again realize that I have to move my meetings because tomorrow I'm not going to be in the office. So it's a surprise, but it also means my week is shorter. I wonder if you can relate to that. Happy about the off day. Sorry that you still have to do all your work, no? Tonight I want to talk about this, and I recognize that the slides, we're going to do some resolution. I think it looks better tonight, thanks. But if you were to tonight name the name of God that speaks into your circumstance now, that you most resonate with, the name of the Lord that you most resonate with tonight. I mean, to David, he was the Lord, my rock, my fortress, my deliverer, or he was the good shepherd, or he was the light in his salvation. To Abraham, he was the burning torch that made a covenant with him, or later on a shield and his exceeding great reward. No? To the guys in Zechariah's time while they were rebuilding the temple, he was the wall of fire all around you that protects you. To the guys going through the wilderness, he was the cloud by day and the fire by night which watches over them. To the guys in Egypt, he was the great Moses, the great deliverer, the Lord whose arm is not too strong, not too weak to save them. There. To John on the island of Patmos, while he's praying for the church, he was the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, the Alpha, the Omega, the Almighty One, and later on the bright and morning star, the one who gives hope, the one who shows that the new day is coming. So I wondered tonight, what is the name by which Jesus revealed himself to his disciples. He said, God is my Father, Dad. Guys, you don't know this, but he's Father, Dad. You don't relate to him like this, but he's my dad. He's Dad to me. And to the disciples, he said, well, if you want to know how I am towards you, I'm the good shepherd, but I'm the bread of life. I'm the vine, the true vine. I'm the resurrection, the life. Lazarus, don't freak out. I'm the resurrection, the life. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. So there are many names of God in the Bible. For a moment, just turn to the person next to you and say, what speaks into my life the most at the moment, the name that I pray with that resonates for me, this is it. So you have 30 seconds. Okay, so you have a few names. So I just want to say that if you're an introvert here in the house tonight, that you don't have to turn to anyone. Someone will turn to you. It's like when you get arrested, if you don't have an attorney, someone will come and work for you. I'm going to read an account, and I just want you to take note of this account of Hagar. And in the past, like I said this morning, sometimes we read this account. There are 2 chapters devoted to Hagar, the Egyptian slave of Sarah and Abraham. There are 2 chapters in the Bible, chapter 16 and chapter 21, devoted to her, to an account of her and Ishmael. And sometimes we read this as Abraham's failure of faith, or maybe Sarah's failure of faith. So you read the story, and it's all about Sarah that didn't believe God, and now we sit with a son that no one wanted, Or we read the story of Abraham, who is holding on, but then Abraham, sinning again. But tonight I'd like us to read the story about the person who this chapter is actually devoted to, about Hagar, a nobody, an Egyptian slave, a young girl, probably much younger than Abraham and Sarah at this point. By this time, Sarah and Abraham have lived for 10 years in Canaan, and then this happened. Now, Sarah had not been able to bear a child for Abraham, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. So Sarah said to Abraham, "The Lord has prevented me from having children. Go and sleep with my servant. Perhaps I can have children through her." And Abraham agreed with Sarah's proposal. So Sarah, Abraham's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian servant, and gave her to Abraham as a wife. So Abraham had sexual relationships with Hagar, and she became pregnant. I wonder sometimes why they put that's one assumes the other one, hey? Anyway, sexual relationship with Hagar, and she became pregnant, Anyway, but when Hagar knew that she was pregnant, she began to treat her mistress, Sarah, with contempt, with anger, with bitterness, with disrespect. So Sarah went to Abraham and said, "My servant doesn't want to obey me anymore." And then Abraham replied, "Look, she is your servant, so you deal with her as you see fit." Then Sarah treated Hagar so harshly that she finally snapped and she ran away. The angel of the Lord found Hagar beside a spring of water in the wilderness along the road to Shur. The angel said to her, "Hagar, Sarah's servant, where have you come from and where are you going?" "I'm running away from my mistress, Sarah," she replied. The angel of the Lord said to her, "Return to your mistress and submit to her authority." And then he added, "I will give you more descendants than you can count." And the angel of the Lord also said to her, "You are now pregnant and will birth a son. You are to name him Ishmael, which means God hears, or God has heard you. For the Lord has heard your cry of your distress." Thereafter, Hagar used another name to refer to the Lord and had spoken to her. And then she said, "You are the God who sees me, El Roi. You are the God who sees me." And she also said, Have I truly seen the one who sees me? So that well was renamed by her Beer Lahoi Roi, which means well of the living one who sees me. Beautiful. It can still be found between Kadesh and Bered. It's a very powerful account. It's a beautiful account. You're welcome to move to the next slide. So most of you know that a way for me to read the text every time and to discern what God is saying in the text to me is by seeing the text as a mirror, asking myself, what of my life or what of our culture can I see in this text? How is this relevant to me? How can I see myself in the text? How can I see my people in the text? How can I identify with the story? Secondly, we can read the text by asking, so which ways is the text a window to see something of God's heart, something of God's kingdom, something of God's purposes in the world, something of God and God's will in the world? And the third one is to read the text and by asking, in which way can I read this text as an invitation for God to say, come, step into this kingdom. This is a doorway for you. This truth is a doorway for you to participate with me in my work in the world. So in that way I read it. Just give me a second. This is the feedback. I hear the voices in my head, but the voices are coming from behind me. There's a voice behind you saying, walk in it. Thanks. So, yes, when I read this text the other day, I was just so moved by the story of Hagar. Like I said, sometimes we read the story, and the story is not about Hagar. The story is about Sarah and her disbelief and Abraham's disobedience, and see the mess that sin causes. Have you heard that story? See the mess that sin causes. See, if you don't obey. And I read this text now, and I'm like, I'm so sorry that I read it like that. Because here we see a slave girl who didn't choose to be a slave. A slave girl far away from her family, living in Canaan now. A slave girl alone. A girl who does not have any choice what to do with her life. In this story, we can see that she doesn't even have a choice what to do with her body. Her body is not hers. Her body belongs to a mistress, and she can do with it what she wants to. Human trade, human trafficking, right here. And she is only given, imagine young girls, imagine someone said to her, listen, my wife can't fall pregnant, come here, into my room, bear children for my, and the abuse, the blatant disrespect. And the sting in the story is you can see that obviously there was a longing inside of her for her own family, her own life, her own children. Because in Middle Eastern times, more than today, it's not just that I have a child. My life is wasted if I die and there's nothing left after me. And what would leave? She wanted children. My life means something in the history of the world. My life has meaning. And you can see, obviously, that's why when she became pregnant with Sarah's child, Abraham's child, which wasn't her child, it was the greatest sting for her, because now I'm bearing children in my body for Sarah. It's not even going to be my child, won't be named as my child, won't be in my legacy. The child won't even look after me in my old age. When I'm old, I will just be discarded and die because I'm just a slave. I'm just a cog in the wheel. The whole sense of my life is meaningless. My life is nothing to with. And that's why she became angry. That's why she became content. That's why the biggest promise that God could give her is saying, you will have more descendants than you think. Your life will have meaning. Your life will have purpose. Your legacy will go on. Your purpose will go on in this world. And that was the sort of the pain that she had. And when I look in this text, I see so much of our culture. Ingrid, maybe you can just slide on there. I see so much of our culture. I see, we like to say to one another that, man, your life is yours to choose what you want to do. Just choose what you want to do and you can do it. But the truth of the story is that there are very few people in this world who can choose what to do with their life. There is, and many of you have that privilege, but I want to say so much of what you will do in life will not be your choice. Our world is filled with cohesion, with pressure, with someone deciding, with the culture deciding what you may and may not do, how you will live and not live. This is our world that we're living in. It's cohesion, and if you want to really test it, then just drive outside of this wealthy suburb into some of the suburbs in Cape Town and see what choices do these people really have, the masses of the people in our world really have. And the truth is not much. I see Hagar's situation in our world, and I see Hagar's situation in my life. I have a great life. I have a good life. God is good to me. God has been good to me. But the truth is, the things that I'm wrestling with in my life, the things that I'm fighting, the things that tap my energy are things that I don't have power over. I must simply make peace and find resolve and find God in this situation somewhere. And that was Hagar's struggle. I see a world of cohesion without compassion. I mean, just picture this. She becomes pregnant, not by her choice. She didn't willingly give herself to Abraham. This was not consensual, yes, let's be intimate sessions. Probably not once. It was an old man. So it's time and time again where she had to endure what she didn't choose to endure, and she fell pregnant. And then eventually she falls pregnant with a child that won't be hers. And she's just going to raise this kid for a few years until she stopped breastfeeding, and then the child becomes Sarah's child, Abraham's offspring, Abraham's descendant, carry the blame and the blessing of God. That was the plan here. And she didn't have a choice in the story. And when she becomes angry, she doesn't receive compassion, concern, care from Abraham and Sarah. She receives severe, harsh treatment because you're not playing with us. I don't like your attitude. Your attitude is not, and was her attitude right? No. But she doesn't get compassion. She gets critique, harsh treatment. So much so that she can't endure it. And please remember that when she ran away, sorry, I'm just taking time to sketch the story for you. And when she ran into the wilderness, a pregnant young woman runs into the wilderness, into the desert. You can read there, suicide. You can read there, I'm going to go, because it would be better to die there than to live on. You can read absolute desperation. A single pregnant woman in the wilderness. Wild animals, barbaric tribes, harsh weather. That's the end of her. But she said, that will be better than where I am. So you can see the harshness. She was absolutely lonely. No one cared about her. No one was concerned about her desires, her longings, which she had. And it's a hectic story. So that's where she is. And then it's also a world full of hopelessness, without anyone wanting to help her. She was just looking for help. She was just looking for someone to listen, to care, to help. But she didn't find any of this. And I can identify so much of a world, but obviously, this is not where the story ends, because the text is also not just a mirror to our society, but it's also a window into God's kingdom. We can see something, and that's why it's recorded in the Bible. We can see something about God's heart for the nobodies. Not the Abraham who has this great promise and great purpose with God, this great man of faith, but actually for the Hagar, the nobody. It's amazing in the story. If you can read it again, read chapter 21 as well. Nowhere does someone refer to her as Hagar. The narrator calls her Hagar, but Abraham and Sarah just calls her servant, servant, servant. She's nameless. They don't care. It says something about the character. They don't know. They don't care what her name is. They don't, they know her name. I assume they know her name. But they didn't care what her name was. They just called her your servant or my servant, your servant, my servant, your servant, my servant. Until at the well, the Lord says, he stops and he sees her weeping at the well and he says, Sarah, Hagar, Sarah's servant, what are you doing here? Why are you here? Why are you weeping? What's wrong? We see something of God's heart for the nobodies, God's heart for those who don't know him at all. We see in this text that God sees those who are invisible in our world. It's true that at times we feel invisible. And I want to maybe just step back out of my leadership life and look at the people around us, in us. And there I can see there are many people in our world which is nameless. They just fulfill a duty, just fulfill a function, and that's who they are. You don't care to know their name. No one cares to know their name because they're there to fulfill a function. And that was Sarah's story. In this account, we see a God who sees the nobodies, and a God who knows the names of the nobodies. He really cares. He knows them intimately. It's not just like he sees them. He sees into their life with compassion. He sees the situation of Hagar. He knows what's happening. He knows the context from his conversation. You pick up, he says, go back to Sarah, your master. Go submit yourself to her. I will strengthen you in it. And then he gives her the most beautiful purpose. He's saying there's purpose in your suffering. Go through it. It's okay. I see you. I know you. You will have more descendants. He doesn't just see the need or the situation, but he also sees the future. God knows and God sees this woman called Hagar, which no one cared about. And then this text is also a door for our response, a most beautiful door, an invitation for us. And in this text, the invitation for us, the whole story pivots in one moment. In one moment. And this is why this account is short and powerful, and you can see the whole thing there. The moment where Hagar recognizes that the Lord sees me. He sees me. And he has been watching me the whole time. The moment when she sees the one who sees her. The next slide, please, Ingrid. When she looks at God and realizes that God has been looking at her the whole time. The moment when she sees the one who sees her. It's the whole story. She names him. It's amazing. It's the first account in the Bible where, and it's one of very, very few accounts, where someone gets to name God. It's amazing. She gets to name God. She gets her own name for God. From now on, she says, I'll call you El Roi, the one who sees me. And the moment is not just seeing me, it's the well. The moment when I see the one who sees me. And that's the point where everything changes for her. That's the moment where her whole narrative turns around, it pivots. Because she sees him who has been looking at her for a long time. I just want to read this text in the Message. She answered Yahweh by name, praying to the God who spoke to her, saying, you are El Roi, the God who sees me. Yes, he saw me, and then I saw him. Look at some other translations here with me. The Message, he saw me, and then I saw him. Have I truly seen the one who's seen me? Him who sees me with understanding and compassion. I love the Amplified there, because it's not the point of knowing or seeing. It's I get you. When someone looks into your soul and says, I hear you, I see you, I really get what's going on in your heart. Even here, I've looked upon my beholder, the Young Living Translation says. I've looked upon the one who has been holding me the whole time. I noticed it. And this is the changing and the pivot point. I want to tell you that in this week, the past few weeks, I've been on just reading and studying a bit of Ignatius' spiritual direction stuff. And St. Ignatius wrote prayer books or prayer retreats. Beautiful. And telling people, how do you, as a normal person who doesn't live in a monastery, how do you cultivate a healthy prayer life? Very useful. 500 years ago, you wrote it. But there's this third edition, the third directive that he gives after writing, how do you have a prayer retreat? He gives us this tip. It's just a few. I found this really useful. Try this. And he wrote this down. The third one says very simply, it says, about 2 paces from the place where I'm going to kneel down or stand and pray, when he moves for a time of prayer now, he says, I just stop 2 paces away, and then he says, I consider, I think about it, I perceive, how is God looking at me now? And he says it changes everything for him in the prayer time. It's not, does God look? Is God here? Will God listen? He asked the question, it's a very bright question, how is the Lord looking at me now? And it's such a powerful question, because it changes my time of prayer from a mechanical thing, which I have to pray, or a list that I have to pray through, or something like that. It changes it from a duty to a personal encounter. We know these people. Some of us are these people, but we know these people. You didn't have a conversation. You were listening to a soliloquy for 45 minutes. It's like someone quoted Macbeth. It's like they're just looking for an audience. Please receive my words. 45 minutes. And then you walk away. And I tell my wife, you know, Margriet, it's been one of those conversations where it's not a conversation. It's simply just this person wanted to say something, and he found a willing victim. And he dumped all of his desires, knowledge, issues on me, and I say, thank you. And I walk away. And you know these people. Some of us are these people, but you know these people. There's no intimacy. There's no connection. There's no life, no transforming power in this conversation. Listen, if you see us for counseling, we get that. We must listen. I'm talking about social conversation at a braai. This is my context. So don't be afraid that you make an appointment with me or Theo and you're going to tell your story. Please tell your story. I'm talking about a social conversation, yeah. And so St. Ignatius says, it's so easy for us to do that in prayer with God. It's so easy for us to not have a life-giving conversation because you have your thing that you want to dump on God or pray to God or give to God or pray through your powerful prayer that you have worked out and you want to give it to Him. It's amazing. Ronald Marsh, Robert Marsh, he wrote an article about spiritual blindness or about mind blindness. And he's saying kids up to the age of 4 don't have the cognitive emotional structure to be able to think that perhaps you see something different than I do. To think of the other person as a person. That you're a unique person with your own feelings, your own thoughts, your own ideas, your own perception. That your perception of life or this encounter can be different from mine, because up until that point, they don't have the mental capacity, emotional capacity to think that perhaps you have other viewpoints. We know adults like that as well. No, you see them on social media, that you have other viewpoints than me. So they can't think about that. And then he says that autism is usually detected around there when the kids should be able to grow into discernment or into the ability to think that you have other ideas, other viewpoints, other feelings, and that's usually how they get it out. And the point is that kids, but autistic children, autistic people, can easily objectify the other person. They don't think of you as a real person sometimes because they don't have the capacity to empathize with your point of view. They don't have the ability to think that you think other than me. So it's a mechanical relationship sometimes. It's just like an objective relationship with you. Anyway, but he's saying, so Robert Marsh says that often we are like that with God. And he says often we do that with God. We have a conversation with God without stopping to think perhaps God is a real person who has another view, other feelings, something else they want to contribute to this conversation, which is not in your frame of reference. Perhaps God has other ideas. Perhaps God wants to bring something to this conversation which you don't bring to this conversation. Perhaps God wants to surprise you in dialogue or just in presence, in being. And this is why the story of Hagar is so beautiful. Hagar was at the end of her being. She was done. She was done. She was it. She was sitting there, and we can see later in life, a few years later, 8 years later, 10 years later, 8 years later, when Isaac was born, and she and Ishmael had to flee because Abraham just pushed her away, she went into the wilderness again to die. She was at the end of her life. But the angel of the Lord pitched and says, I see you. I see who you are. I get who you are. I feel you. I really get it. I understand. I want to say, there's another way. Go back. I'm going to make a way. And I see your future. And I want to tell you. And it changed her life because she sees him who sees her. She has an encounter with God who sees her and sees her future. And everything changes. And it's one of those biblical stories where everything changes but nothing changes. Because she goes back to Sarah. She goes back to Abraham. They still see her as a slave, as an object. You can see that in the end of the story. But her whole being changed because of a living encounter with God that she has not seen before. And Robert Marsh says, Ignatius says, there's a way in which we enter into a prayer time with God where before we engage in this prayer, we just stop and look. Can we look at God who has been looking at me all this time to become still in the presence of him? So I want to share a story. Maybe just one slide up, please. Thanks. On Tuesday night, so just an example. On Tuesday night, I had such a powerful encounter. So Tuesday, I've been practicing this for a while, but on Tuesday, one of those, we have times with God and then we have those times with God, né? So I was set up for one of those. I had a telephonic conversation, a conference with someone. It really upset me. The conversation upset me. Actually, I upset myself because some of you can identify with it, I see. I said things that I wasn't aware was in here. Sometimes you talk, and when you talk too much, then what is in here comes out here, and you hear it, and you go like, this is really disturbing. This is really how I feel. So I went home. Just after 4:30, I went home, and I went to Magriet, and I walked into the door, and, it's as though there was a vibe because I was there. She turns around, and we were on our way to small group, and she says, wow, what upset you so much? And I said, I don't really want to talk about it because I was afraid that when I talk about it more, I would be more upset. So I did tell her a little bit. Then we went to small group. Small group is easy because there are other people and, it's easy. I can just enjoy the time there with the friends over dinner. And then I went back home and I was hit with the heaviness again. And so the evening, I knew it wasn't wise for me to just go to sleep now. So I went into a room, closed the door, and I did this again. Before I started praying about what's on my heart, I was going to sit in the bed. So I stopped, I was just listening to him, and I closed my eyes, and I breathed, and I said, I'm here, God. And then I saw him who've been watching me the whole day. I saw him who was looking at me. I beheld him who was beholding me. And the image was God, my image of God in that evening was a massive elephant bull, a Namibian desert elephant bull to be precise. And it's amazing. I was so surprised because I have not been in Namibia for many years, and I didn't consider elephants or Namibian desert elephants for a very long time. So the Lord revealed himself to me, and I saw this eye. That's why I went on the internet until I found this. I want to show you what I saw. And I saw this image of this massive elephant bull. Now, for those of you who've been close to an elephant, knows what I'm talking about. For those who haven't, perhaps you've been close to a horse. It's similar. If you're close to a horse, the calm, peaceful presence of this strong, strong animal with the big eye, now obviously the elephant is just bigger, that looks into you. It's intimacy. It's like literally looks into me. This is like a moment, the connection. So there you get where the name comes from. It's like literally looking into me with patience, with wisdom. And it's an ancient elephant. It's like, they know, but they've been here. I've been here. God's saying, I've been here. I know, I see. And then I saw a series of images, just visions, just where God, this elephant, took the small elephant in his trunk and just played with it, held it, and then walked through the desert dunes to the place where there's water, but like patient. And I was so reassured before my time of prayer, before I prayed anything, before I said anything, I was so aware that he saw me, that he was looking at me, that God was looking me in the eye, and he knew what was happening, and he knew where we're going to. Such a peaceful reassurance. I know tonight that I'm talking a lot. I'm aware. I want to tell you that he who met with Sarah, or he who met with Hagar, that the Lord really is waiting for us to see him who sees us. And if we do this on a regular basis, it changes your life. It changes you. It changes your prayer time from a duty to something that you want to do to a meeting with a person who's been waiting for you a very long time. Very long time, very intimate. I know that we know cognitively, you're bright. You know that God knows you. You know God knows how many hair you lost this week. You know God knows how much weight you pick up or lost because of your dietary issue. You know God knows everything about you. This is not a cognitive knowing. This is a intimacy, looking me in the eye, seeing me. God says, I see you. El Roi, I'm he who sees you. I want to share a few things with you about this. First one, how this changes. We don't begin with prayer alone. Every time you go to pray, we begin not with a prayer, but with someone who sees me, someone who's been waiting for me. Draw near to me, says God, and I will draw near to you, James 4:8. Literally, to stand in front of him, and before you do anything, become aware of him that waits for you. Changes it. Changes you. You see him. You close your eyes. You become still until you see him. And then you start your conversation. It's beautiful. We don't begin prayer with dull. We begin with as a surprise. The surprise element's amazing. That's what changes. That's the big thing that changes, because it's not one person who prays. It's really a conversation. It's a big difference. We have all had these prayers where you go to God and you've got to cry out and you pray to God, and God meets you there. It's amazing. God does meet you there. But if you begin with seeing him who sees you, there's an element of surprise, and he reveals to you how he is. Remember the question of Ignatius? Not become aware of Him that is present, you become aware of how He's present to you now. On Wednesday night, I was still wrestling with this thing, and I went to a room to pray. Margriet and the kids were in bed. We had one of those late evenings again. I went to a bed. I just went to the other room to pray, and I was really tired. I was baie moeg. The previous night, Marguerite, my daughter, didn't sleep well, so I was up quite a few times, and I was quite tired and emotionally tired. So I just went to pray again, and the image of God, as I just became quiet, was just my big dad. So I have a boy, Nathan, so it's easy. God mirrored the whole story of him rubbing the few hair that I still have left, rubbing my hair, and just grabbing me over my shoulders and like wrestling, and then we fell on the bed in a sense, and I was on his chest, and we had a conversation. Looking at the stars, we had a conversation. So I just mirrored that. I fell in bed, and I started having a conversation until I fell asleep with God. It changes everything. And this big thing that I can't change, it's okay, because it's okay. Dad knows. Dad is in control. It's not a technical how to pray to get your answers. It's the praying to see Him who sees you. It's a big difference. So it starts with a surprise. It starts with a God who is real. Any good conversation always has an element of surprise. I didn't know that. Wow. Serious. You didn't know? Yeah, it's amazing. We don't begin with prayer as a duty. In prayer, we respond to a relationship. It's intimacy. It's an encounter. If you start by looking at Him who sees you, by noticing Him who notices you, it starts with a relationship, not with a prayer duty, not with a thing. And this is an encounter which actually transforms you. It changes you deep on the inside. 2 Corinthians 3:18, as we behold Him, we are transformed into His image from one degree of glory to another. It really changes who we are. I'm going to close now. I want to end with something in the story that we haven't touched in. So Hagar ran into the wilderness at a well, ready to die. This is the end. She's pregnant, it's hopeless, she can't go back there, she can't go on. And the angel of the Lord, she sees Him who sees her. The Lord gently tells her, go back, stop with your rebellion, stop with your anger. I will give you your descendants. I will bless you, but go back there. This is not life for you. You will die here. Go back there. It's harsh, but go back. I will save you. And then she goes back. But before she goes back, she does something powerful, which is so useful for me. And this is what I'm talking about tonight. She names not only God, Him who sees me, she names the well. Well, place in the wilderness where you find life, refreshing, where life is possible, that place where you run to when you really can't go anymore, a place of refreshing, of life, of vibrancy. She names the well, the God who sees me. This is where I was seen by Him who sees me. And I want to ask you, what are the wells in your life that you've named, of whom He sees you? Those encounters that we have, how do you make a well of an encounter? If you're missing what I'm saying because I'm speaking metaphorically, I want to ask you, how will you remember the encounters of God? Because that is the useful thing that you want to remember. The reason why you know of the stuff, and I have a whole list of things that happened, these encounters with God, is because years ago I started journaling, and I don't journal everything. I started doing it like that, but then after a while I figured out I'm never going to read this is pointless, So I started journaling. So journaling is therapeutic. But I started journaling these encounters with God so that I will remember, so that I will have a well to go back to when I feel alone again, or when I feel forgotten again. A well where you go like, this is where He met me. This is where I can remind myself that I was in this space and I had this visceral encounter with Him, this encounter that touched me and changed me forever, where I had courage again, why I could believe and why I could name Ishmael, God who hears, is because I had an encounter with God. And I really want to encourage you to start your devotional times not in a mechanical prayer or a duty or to study the scriptures, but to start it by discerning how is God watching you, and when you see Him, make a note and saying, today I met the great elephant bull the ancient God who knows the paths in the wilderness, and He will take me to places. I'm not alone. I don't know how to traverse these desert places, but I'm following the elephant bull. He will take me there. Or today, I had an encounter with Dad, and he enjoyed me. And he bullied me a bit, and then we played on the bed, and I told him how I felt, and I fell asleep. You know, something in your journal that makes your relationship with God not just life-giving for the moment, but you get to know Him over time as this personal, relational God. I want to encourage you to do that. I'm going to pray now. As I pray, before I pray, I'm going to ask the worship team to come forward. We're not going to protract the service long. It's a long weekend. But I want to ask you, I started the conversation, the sermon, saying, how do you see God today? Who is He to you today? How does He reveal Himself to you? We're going to lead you in worship, but I want to ask you, perhaps rather than singing too much now, if you can just sit and just become aware of God who is here. Close your eyes. Hey, if you say, listen, man, this is difficult for me. I've never had such an encounter. I want you to try it out, to wait on God and see if He's able to make Himself visible to you. Trust Him to make Himself visible, rather for you to see Him. Just say to Him, show yourself to me. And it can be a strange elephant bull. It can be a cosmic whale. It can be a bright and morning star. It can be a shield, a wall, a rock, my fortress, my deliverer. It can be a true vine. How? It's a metaphor that speaks to you. God will reveal Himself in a way that makes sense to you. So you don't have to figure it out. He'll make Himself available to you. So let's pray. Can we ask someone at the back just to dim the lights for us, please? Thanks, Sam. Great God, relational God, eternal God. God, I thank You that You are able to make Yourself known to me today. I thank You that You are able to reveal Yourself to me today, to us. And God, I thank You that You are the God who through the Scriptures always seek to make Yourself known, God, even by those who don't seek You, like Hagar, God. You are drawn to those who need help, God, to those whose hearts are weak, to those who feels a lack of strength, to those who feel alone. I thank You that You're the God who comes to the brokenhearted. I thank You that You're the God who seeks out those who desire You. So great God, through Your Spirit, will You make Yourself known in this place tonight? In Jesus' name. Let us look to Him who has been looking to us, looking at me for a long time. In Jesus' name.